Hello and welcome to my presentation. Raising minimum wage is not sustainable. For decades, politicians and economists have thought about this question. What if we could end poverty? Or rather, how can we end poverty? While many aspects of this have been talked about, including job creation, reducing the unemployment rate, taxing billionaires more heavily, today I'm going to talk about one possible solution to this question, which is, of course, raising minimum wage. I'll be covering 3 reasons why I think raising minimum wage is a bad idea. The first idea is that it causes inflation. Next, I'll talk about how it can hurt small businesses. And lastly, I'll talk about how raising minimum wage harms the people that it's intended to help. Before I can explain why raising minimum wage will cause inflation, we must first define it. Inflation can be defined as the sustained upward movement in the overall price level of goods and services in an economy. This basically means that in an isolated economy, inflation will increase the products and services cost, or the price of them, as time passes. I'm sure you've all heard an older person say something like, "When I was little, we could buy an ice cream cone for only 5 cents. Well, today an ice cream cone costs between $1 and $2, and this is because inflation slowly raises prices over time. Raising minimum wage would accelerate the rate at which inflation moves. To illustrate this principle, let's assume an isolated economy of 3 workers and 1 grocery store. Each 3 of these workers makes the national minimum wage. At the grocery store, the price of bread, milk, and eggs are $1, $2, and $3 respectively. While each worker may not have a large salary, they can still afford basic groceries like bread, milk, and eggs. Now let's say that the government decides to raise minimum wage to $15 an hour. Now all of these workers are being paid nearly double what they used to make. Finally, everyone has a comfortable living wage, but not exactly. The prices of bread, milk, and eggs have doubled. Businesses noticed that people were making twice as much money as they used to, which means that they can feasibly double the prices of their products and people will still be able to afford them. The example I showed you was very simple, and our economy is much more complex than that, but the underlying principles from the economy, or from the example, are true of our economy. As people make more money, businesses realize that they can make more money by charging higher prices. I know you're thinking, okay, why don't businesses just not raise prices? Well, we have to remember that they're paying employees too. They have to charge higher prices because all their employees are being paid much more than they used to be. This is especially true for small businesses. Let's see. To summarize in one statement, raising minimum wage will lower the buying power of the dollar. The second point I want to make is that it hurts small businesses. Let's illustrate this point with another easy example. Mix Grocery is a small grocery store and only has $30 per hour allocated in the payroll budget. Therefore, Mix Grocery can afford to pay 4 employees at minimum wage. Since they are a small business, they probably don't make enough money to pay their employees any more than that. So now let's suppose that the government comes in and raises the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Mix Grocery still has a budget of $30 per hour, but now they have to pay each employee much more. They can only afford to pay 2 employees now. The other 2 employees are fired because the business is low. They no longer have the funds to pay them, leaving them understaffed. Now let's run a similar situation, only this time using a big company that sells groceries, which is Walmart. Walmart sells many other things other than groceries, and they don't rely on just the profit from groceries to survive. They make lots of money in many different departments. They're a very large corporation, and they can afford to pay employees more because the amount of customers they receive compared to Mixed Groceries is astronomical. Walmart has $60 an hour allocated to the payroll budget. They can afford to pay 4 employees at $13 an hour. Now the government comes in and raises the minimum wage to $15. Walmart raises their wages and they can still afford to keep all their employees. They are nearly unaffected by this new law. They adapt and thrive. The key takeaway from this example is that big corporations like Walmart already pay high wages, while small businesses can't afford to do so. The raising of minimum wage will shift the power in favor of big businesses, even more than it already is. Do we really want a few companies dominating the market? The last point is that raising minimum wage will harm the people it was intended to help. We've seen this in the first 2 points of the presentation. The intention behind this law is to give the lower class a better living wage. We want every human being to be able to live a comfortable life without worrying about where their next meal is coming from. Everyone deserves a decent wage. But small businesses simply can't pay as well as big businesses, which leads to many people being laid off, raising the unemployment rate. During a period like this, it would be very difficult to find a job. And to end this point, I'd like to read an excerpt from an article on Forbes.com written by Dave Murata. Your order at the McDonald's drive-thru can be routed to a call center in India. The worker in India can take your order with wonderfully articulate English skills and training to upsell the latest products. Meanwhile, a team of people cooking burgers can be replaced by a culinary robot and a $15 per hour supervisor. So he's saying that raising minimum wage could potentially lead to automation. It won't be long before fast food chains start investing in machines that can cook the food themselves instead of having a human do it. This is bad news for low-skilled workers. Not only do they not have a livable wage, they don't even have a job anymore. So to conclude, raising minimum wage is a bad idea because it could potentially accelerate inflation. We would begin to see price increases in many or all of our products. Inflation is a nasty, never-ending cycle of lowering the power of the dollar, so to raise minimum wage would be like running in circles. It would also devastate small businesses and help big businesses, which is the opposite of what we want to do. We want to spread the wealth, not select a few people to hoard all of it. It would also hurt low-skilled workers and teenagers trying to get their first job. In many cities, a life of drugs and crime might be more appealing to a teenager than a burger flipping job that is very hard to acquire. We need to keep young people from going down the wrong path, and making low-skill jobs less accessible is not the way to go. It's the wrong thing to do. So, thank you for coming and listening to my presentation.